So I don't know. Ellen Goody, is that a disease or something when I start reading the BTC reports that come to me?
I think it is, Blake. It is 4 o'clock, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Blake, can I ask you a favor? I have to take a phone call from an employee that's ringing right now. Can you start, and I'll jump in as soon as I can? I just don't want to waste anybody's time.
Sure can. Give me a little bit to pull up my plan document. Sorry, I'm trying to catch in my notes where we left off with on our analysis of the plan document. I have all of my notes, but I didn't mark where we stopped at.
I think we stopped right after plan year in the definitions. That's where I wrote down that we stopped.
There it is. It even has my 3 little marks. I just had to get there. I thought we were a little further ahead, so I was wishfully thinking I was on page 9 or 10. Okay, so what we'll do until Kathy jumps back in is we'll just kind of go down through these items and see if there were any questions, comments, or where we may need more clarification. So are there any questions or comments about the terms in R, regulations, the required distributions, retired participant, retirement reserve fund? Anything in the R's that anyone wants to pose question, concern, or anybody else who wants to put on their pirate hat and deal with the R issues? All right, hearing and seeing no one, are there any questions about the definition of secretary or spouse in the S section on page 6?
None from me.
Any questions on T's for the definition of teacher trust, trustee, trust fund?
Do we need to modernize the definition in teacher? I was reading through the definitions like girls advisors and things like that, so I wasn't sure if we wanted to update that section at all.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a more broad definition that applies to any current active or inactive active member that would fit in that, because it is an interesting definition. You go, oh.
Well, we do have people who are retired who do fit into that definition, and that did serve as girls advisors. So I know that that's the case because I've interviewed some of those folks and they were girls advisors. So maybe we need to leave it in there while those people are still alive.
Any questions or thoughts in V or Y? Valuation
and Lola,
date.
We can't hear you, Lola. I think you were
sorry.
trying to say something and we can't hear you.
Now and it looks like you're unmuted even on our side. Okay, Lola, do you have the chat? Can you type it into the chat? Maybe. Do you have a dry erase board there, Lola? Hold up the dry erase board and we'll. I'll pause just a second, Lola. We'll see if you come up with a method. Smoke signals.
Does that say counselors?
Yeah, Lola, if you could hold it on that note a little longer. So back to P's on page 6. Oh, that's where we picked up on.
Yeah, I think we need to add counselors, is what she's saying there.
And that's why I wonder if we don't have, if there's a cleaner definition, like by, I'm not saying this is right, but is it like would have been or is currently like on a certified contract? If there was a component where we just have that simple language that then just covers anyone and everyone, no matter what the current title is, what their title might be. So I guess maybe that's a question that we can come back to is there a cleaner definition that makes sure that we don't lose anybody and can also then create that flexibility as titles change and morph, but certainly highlighting, we know that we can see that counselor is not on there.
We have, it's certified employee. That's what we use in our HR department, certified employee.
Right.
Anybody who has to have a certificate.
I'm back.
Yeah, that's why I wonder if that word, Kathy, we're on page 6, the definition of teacher, and wondering if there's a simplified like certified staff member, if that phrase then can allow us to not have to have like a laundry list of people that are included, and whether that becomes full encompassing for anyone who's retired, no matter what title they would have had, and any title changes that might change over the next, couple decades that will have people still on the plan.
Could we do like teacher, certified staff, or covered under a 279 contract?
Yeah, that's what I wonder under it.
Yeah. Hey, I just noticed that Brad jumped on, and I also noticed that Alan Goody is on. Alan, I think today we're just going through the plan document, unless anybody else has anything that needs to be elevated for Alan today. Otherwise, we could probably let him go unless you have a burning desire to listen to plan document discussion.
No, that's, thanks for the heads up, Kathy. Appreciate that. And I'll be on next month, and let me know if there's anything that comes up. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, let's pick up then, and Kathy, you can jump in. Where we went through T's and V's and Y's, and then we went a little backwards. So we're now in Article 2, Section 2.1, page 7.
Okay. All right.
Anybody have any thoughts or questions on Section 2.1 eligibility requirements? Oh, look at you. Good job. Nice.
I noticed that last sentence says employees eligible to participate in the plan include only employees who are teachers. And so is that just because all of the people in the plan were once teachers? Because, I mean, now that we've defined teachers, I get that. And I guess since under teacher, it says superintendents, blah, blah, blah. So never mind. I just answered my own question.
How we currently classify is we say teachers and administrators, or anyone who held, but those administrators would have a 279 contract as well. So I'm wondering if we utilize that language, then if we're consistent in this sentence to tie it back together. And Shashank, I noticed that you just joined as well. We are going through the plan document. You are welcome to stay on if you would like to go through the plan document section by section. But if you would not like to, we understand that as well.
Perfect. I think what we can do is then maybe when update me with any changes, if any.
Yeah, we'll update with changes as we continue.
Wonderful. Sounds good. Great.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Moving on to participation, section 2.2.
My question was, is this the place where we reflect that the plan is closed to new members?
Yeah, maybe we do like employees eligible to participate in plan prior to whatever that date was that we closed would have been eligible, blah, 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 as of such and such new enrollment, or enrollment is closed. Trying to find. All right, I have that on my notes. 2.3. This is a long one.
And my question is really just more of that I'm trusting that someone's done some legal review on like what are sections 414U, 401A, 37, and all those codes. I was not a good student. I did not go and look up all those codes and see that they were appropriate for this section.
That would be Catherine in her cross-referencing work on this. We'll just make sure that.
I'm here. I've got that as a note. My plan was to take these discussed changes together with any additional legal review and produce a final red line document when we have made our way through the entirety of the plan.
Perfect. Right. Where I think it's interesting is that they shall remain on a leave of absence shall remain a participant until death or retirement, or until they cease to be an employee. Okay, so never mind. Just confusing. It's like the wording of that I think is kind of cumbersome.
I think it's an interesting order that it's written in.
Yeah, you die. They have
Or you
that as the
retire.
first option.
Or you
Yeah.
quit.
All right, here's the next interesting language.
Again, my question is just one of, is pick up contribution the correct terminology?
And
Or is
Catherine,
it?
I don't know, is that I did some research and it looks like it has some basis in legal where that term comes from. However, when people read it, I don't think they understand what that means. An employer pickup contribution essentially is the employee's contribution. And I think if there's a way to clarify that, so someone reading it knows this was my contribution versus the district's. Employer pickup sounds like on first blush that the employer's making the contribution. Well, we're taking it from your check. That's all we're doing. It's your money. So I just think it's misleading.
Agree.
I will make a note to give that some thought. The pickup contribution is an IRS term of art, but we can probably find a way to describe it in alternative words.
Yeah, I wonder if a simple last sentence can't be added to like clearly state this is your employee contribution coming from your pre-tax basis salary. Like the last sentence is actually okay, but we could maybe highlight that.
Right, and maybe say, and in further, will be referenced on statements as your employee contribution or whatever, because that's what we call it on everything. And then if you go back and look at the plan document, you're like, what?
Yeah, that would be a clean way to say this is referenced in your paycheck and your DMTRS statement as blank.
Okay, after tax contributions, those are no longer being made. So each year prior to 1995, so it's kind of. And then employer matching. This is where. This is where I think we need to clean up a little bit where it talks about the appendixes, because I'm not sure it's referencing the correct appendix, especially in item B. Because it lists B1 through B4, and I think we're on C something, if I remember correctly. I'm gonna do a quick scroll here. I'll be right back. I'm looking down here to see what the.
Yes, C3.
Yeah, C3, and the last one that's referenced in the plan was.
Is bingo 4.
Yeah, so we're off on that. So I think for sure 3.3 needs updated to reflect correct appendix and so do we need it? It goes through 2010. So then do we need to catch up each time we made a change? So C1, C2, C3?
Kathy, would there be anyone who would have not, could there be, yes, I answered my own question. Yeah, I think it needs to be current. I was going to ask and say, would there be someone who could have still been in C1 or C2? And the answer is yes, they could have retired and made that adjustment. So yeah, I think we need a C1 year, C2, C3.
And there was also a few people who elected back in the day to not make the changes. And I
Right.
think we still have a couple of those. I want to say we have 2 left. And so I don't know how to reflect that in this wording, but I think it does need to be reflected because this looks like everybody is on C3 and not everybody is. So somehow in there, some wording of if they chose the election to move to those schedules, otherwise they were frozen. And I'll need to look at maybe see if I can pull those old elections out and see what the wording was on them at that time and try to correlate that language.
I'm going to throw a question that's kind of a monkey wrench, which was I would be curious when people had that choice, were those options the correct options to give employees? Was that all in alignment with where, state code was and is? That's just sort of my general curiosity. And I say that because earlier in the plan document, there really are comments and references where you don't have an option as an employee as those numbers moved. And I know that we gave people that option. I just wonder is there a place in here where we need to actually catch and line everybody up? Was that option fair, legal, appropriate? That doesn't need to be discussed on here, but I think at some point I'd be curious of that. Again, given that there are other references in the document where an employee doesn't have flexibility.
I think those would probably be things we need to look to Catherine for. I know at the time when they elected, it was still okay for them to have a choice, but then the rule changed. So if the choice was already made, I think we're okay. But again, I'll defer to Catherine for her legal expertise.
So I'm looking at the amendment that was put out on January 8th of 2013 that pretty much changes, or, you know, it's just the new wording for this section. Does anybody have that? Yeah.
Here's the amendment for 2013, and we probably need to merge this wording into that section because it looks pretty extensive here. So this catches into up through C3. And here it says who did consent to an increase. So I think this captures everything. Good catch there, Barb. Way to put. So we need to merge the amendment of 2013 into that section 3.3. Okay. All right, 3.4. No questions? All right, 3.5. And I think this one we would also dovetail with that amendment from 2013. I'm trying to write myself notes as I talk. That's the delay. And I feel like this is all okay. My only thing is this Director of Human Resources is probably not the correct terminology.
Yeah, I don't know how we create the most generic language so that if that title changes 10 more times in 10 more years, that we have the appropriate district official.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll just need to do a scan of where it says Director of HR and clean up some of that and figure out how we want that worded. Because it's really not, to me, they're not submitting their age to the Director of HR. They're submitting it with their employment materials. I mean, you had to certify all of that stuff with your employment materials. I'm sure that Susie Tallman doesn't want everybody running in and saying, here's my birth certificate, I'm this old. So somehow to maybe make that follow what we do for process. Anybody else, feel free to jump in as I'm writing and keep the discussion going, because I feel like I'm slowing it down here with my writing. Okay, 3.7. That looks pretty standard. 3.8, contributions while on leave of absence. In essence, I think this says we make the contributions based on whatever income you're getting. So if you're not getting a paycheck, you're not making a contribution and you're not getting a district match. If you're getting a paycheck, it's based on the percentage of what's coming out. I think that that's a really long way to say that, but.
And I think it's saying like the employee can make a contribution if they want to. And then it has that provision for people who may have been absent due to serving for national defense. They can make an after-tax contribution, blah, blah, blah.
And I've never known of anyone that has done that, but I guess that's the option. So we leave the option there. All right. Any wording changes on that one, or is everybody okay with that? All right. 4.1. Seems pretty standard. 4.2. Everybody all right with that one? Okay. Forfeitures, just as a general course here, we have not had forfeitures in forever because you only have to have 4 years to be vested, and everybody that's in it, has pretty much had that. So we haven't had to apply that, but I still think it needs to be noted. But we're not going to have that because nobody new is joining the plan, and everybody is vested. So.
Kathy, I just wanted, so every current active member is vested?
I think so. I'm trying to think. I don't think we've had any new entrants. We closed it in 2018, didn't we?
Correct. And
So,
then we would have,
yeah.
there'd be no inactive actives. There's no one that who was like in 16, 17, 18, 3 years and then left and has an inactive account.
We have a couple inactives, but when we send their statements, they don't have an employer portion because they weren't vested when they left.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. And on this one, I'm thinking the 415 limit needs to be updated on section 4.4. And all these, I know section 415, I don't know section 419E. So again, these are ones I'm probably going to have to rely on Catherine for. These just seemed very, when you read them, they're not intuitive at all. And I don't know if there's better ways to word them to help it be more understandable. I think that was the goal here, is to make this plan document more of a user-friendly document. And this is not user-friendly, at least not to this user.
Well, and my question is if we've had any issues, because I find the whole next 4 pages for me is all very, it just reads very legalese, and like, have we had any issues in the last 20 years that relate to anything within section 4.4?
Nothing in 4.4 that I'm aware of.
And even into 4.5, because to me 4.5, they just dovetail into each other.
4.4 is about as painful to read as you can.
I was just telling my husband that we're wading through legal jargon, so he got it,
Yeah,
Get him on here.
see, like, even this defined benefit fraction, I have no idea what that even means.
Come on, Kathy.
So-
It clearly says it's the numerator of which is the sum of the participants' projected annual benefits under all benefit defined plan. Come on, it says right there.
Yeah. It's the denominator one that's the confusing. The denominator of which is the lesser of 125% of the dollar limitation. Like, what does that really mean? Catherine, can you help us with some of those maybe? And whoever you have review this, if there's a way to help make some of that stuff more understandable. And Brad, do you have any guidance on that might help?
There's a lot going on there.
Yeah, you think?
I would need to get out yeah, I'll draw some pictures. I'll have to think about that.
I'm thinking maybe Brad, we can give you homework of these 2 sections to kind of just look at and see if there's anything that you would suggest that might be beneficial. I don't know, or even if that's outside of your realm, you tell us and we'll have Catherine continue to pursue that one. But those are really long sections, both of those, and they are really cumbersome and confusing. And I'm sure that the information in them is all relevant and important, but I just don't think that the way that it's stated is easy to digest for anyone.
Let's see here. Yeah, when's our next meeting?
It's in a month, and this is a big ask. And so if you even want to just look and give us a few ideas, that's fine. You don't need to do a complete rewrite, but if there's, or even some samples of things that we might consider, I don't
Can
know,
someone push this to the top of my inbox so I can look at it, and then maybe I'll multitask for the next 10 minutes and sort through it. I can do this. I just need to find the time, but you've got my time right now. So
Okay.
maybe I'll multitask while you're diving into other things.
And I think I sort of maybe pose this in front is maybe delay Brad looking at it to see, because I'd want Catherine to look at it and say, is this even language that we can be touching? Because it just reads as if somewhere along the way, this is just straight up legal pension language from somewhere. And if that's what it is, we could put a note on the top of the page that says, this is just a lot of legalese for you. Not that we omit it, but we don't necessarily need to, define some of those pieces. So that would be my only suggestion, is that it just reads very, very legal, and I don't want to see us messing with something and then create a problem that, again, hasn't been a problem for 20 years.
Yeah, you could leave that, but then also have either a part of like committee materials or available to participants, just sort of like, hey, if you're reading this, here's a picture of what that means. Just to make it more understandable, so you don't have people reading it and not understanding it for years to come.
Just so everyone's aware, this is Catherine. My plan is to do a little research and see if there's a treatise or other source that we could simply reference and say the plan will follow the XYZ treatise when determining allocation limitations or something to that effect. I agree with Blake. This looks like form language. That doesn't mean it's bad though. But I am a little hesitant to remove it because it is likely one of the requirements to have some plan in place to describe any limitations that might apply. So I'll do some homework as well.
Okay. Can somebody send that? Blake, can you fire that off to Brad since I've got my screen up and I don't want everybody to watch my emailing as we go forward. So if you want to go ahead and send that to Brad so he's got it, because I know you've got it. You're muted, but I saw you kind of nod your head.
I just was making sure I was sending the plan document and not just sections 4.4 and 4.5. I was like, well, that'll be a little bit tricky if I just want to send those sections. But yeah, I'll send it.
Thank you. 4.6. I know we still do the 3-year, the 6-year. I'm not sure what our methodology is there. Blake, are you talking to us again? Okay, he's talking to himself.
Doug's actually about 4 feet away from me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm impressed that you both can concentrate on this. I think this looks accurate here, this portion. Then it starts to get kind of, again, kind of murky. This is all kind of actuarial stuff that happens behind the scenes. So I don't think probably has a lot of actual meaning to the participant at the time. But I think it still needs to be in there. I'm not saying it needs to go away. I think it needs to be in there. And again, it's one of those things that I don't think is easy reading. Anybody have any comments on that one? And Melissa, maybe your helper can help us read through it and tell us if it makes sense.
George, does this make sense to you? Can you read all this?
George, the answer is no.
Cute.
Now he's making helpful notes on my plan document on my iPad.
Great. Any questions on this section? Specifically, I think on B is the one for me that reads very difficult.
So I'll pose a BC question, which is, and maybe this is not the right place, but where do we do an insertion of defining excess earnings? And I know we have some of that from one of the amendments. I don't know if it's here. I don't know if there needs to be something here and something somewhere else.
Let me look, because let me find, I thought I had excess
Section
earnings.
5.
Yeah.
5.13.
It was the amendment from 2016.
Yes.
Yep. And that is here.
Just
Section
know if we need, I don't know if we need that supplemental language to go with 4.6 letter C, or if keeping it broad, then because it's defined somewhere else, if that's sufficient. I don't think we can explain excess earnings in enough places on here. That's just my general
Do we
opinion.
put like in parentheses here, see section 5.13?
We could. Good reference point.
Yeah, rather than restating it, maybe just referencing it. All right, writing myself notes. All right. All right. So again, I think this is confusing because it makes it look like if I were to just read this and I see employer pickup, I think I'm 100% vested in the employer contribution and I'm not. So if we can clean up that, so employer pickup means, you know, your employee contribution.
Yeah, it may be helpful anytime that comes in to just kind of, you know, reiterate what that is.
Mm-hmm. I'm writing myself notes, sorry.
And my question comes into play in B, and it actually goes into the next page, which is really trying to understand what's the rationale for the 89.29 and the 100% non-forfeitable. Is that something that the district had, district decided? Is there something from the IRS? I'm just curious where and why and how those numbers are in place.
So 89.29, interestingly enough, back in the day, before we changed the employer contribution levels, put your employer and your employee accounts equal. And it doesn't anymore, but it used to be then, so you got whatever the district had, whatever you had put in, you got equal from the district back. And I don't know, I'm assuming that's plan specific to this plan because I've never seen anything like that before. But that's where that 89.29 comes in. And I know that because we're currently have a challenge under our plan of a deceased participant that did not claim benefits before they died. They had left our employment for quite some period of time and then died before claiming, and they want the 100%. So I'm working with legal counsel outside on that. So that's why the 89.29 is familiar to me. Yeah, I know it's an eye roller, Blake. What's confusing to me is, so we have a lot of people that left before 55, but wait until they're after 55 to take their money. And how would you read this then? What would you get if you did that?
If you had 4 or more years of service, you're getting 100%. You're getting everything that was put in plus the interest that earned.
I'd say if you left before 55 and you didn't take it and you're not working for the district anymore, then you'd get the 89 according to this.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Agree.
And that's in practice how it's worked. But then when we changed, it used to be really easy when before we changed the employer contribution percentage, because you just made their employee and their employer equal and you moved forward. Now you have to do a bunch of calculations when they leave. So anyway, so I guess looking at that, we're in agreement. It sounded like that if you left before 55, even though you had more than 4 years of service, you get the 89.29. If you left 55, most of those people will take their money if they leave at 55. They don't just leave it sit.
So are you recommending that we add a number, like a third definition in there to fit that gap?
I just think
So-
it's confusing.
I think it's confusing too. I'm just struggling with the punitive nature of it and sort of the why at this point.
I think it was there because it was, you only worked for us for 5 years and then you left, and we're not going to give you that addition. But my thing is, we only contributed to them for 5 years then. And so they wouldn't, it's not like we're giving them this huge cash flow of money.
Right. I mean, it's a couple $100 and, plus maybe a little applicable interest. And I'm struggling too with why leave a hole in there. 4 years and less than age 55, 40 years and less than age, well, the 25 years and less than age 55, and you still have that same consequence.
Yeah. And trying to think, maybe I can go back and get information on how many people we have that are sitting in that boat right now. That, are inactive actives that this would hit. And yeah, how much it would cost the plan, because it's an increased plan cost. And do you want to spend money, and this is not going to come out right and sound very kind of me, but do you want to spend money on people that aren't here? Or would you rather spend your money on people that stayed?
I think you also need to consider that some people who are currently active but choose to leave before they turn 55, maybe not, for another 10 years, but, before they turn 55, we still need to have that clarity. So even if they're inactive actives right now, that's one group, but we could have some actives that choose to leave before they turn 85 or before they turn 55, and we need to clarify what this language means.
Right. Right. So some clarity. I'm trying to think for my notes what to write here.
I think this is an item that we actually need to have some discussion of. I think it's almost one of those items that we need to look at and say, is there reason to change or not? So this is not really about the cleanup of the plan document. It's really more about fundamentally. I think we do have to have some clarity of 4 years of service and less than age 55. And if we decide that it stays at 89.29, let's just say it's really, you left before age 55, it's 89.29. Regardless of whether it was 4 years, 5 years, or 25 years.
I think the 4 years is solely to point out you're vested.
Right.
So maybe vested and less than age 55. And then, vested in 55 or more, maybe sounds better.
Yeah, I agree.
But there's a philosophical question here too about which way we go. We've had our historical practice, which is if you leave before age 55 and are vested, that you get 89, and that if you leave after 55, you get 100. Is that right? I mean, when Kathy asked that question, we had two different answers to that question about how to interpret what this says.
Mm-hmm.
But Blake is also right. We need to discuss the philosophy behind it and what it means and whether we agree with that philosophy.
Well, and I think that when we define that, I think that information needs to be printed on any report that goes out to a member. And I think, to me, this is one of those fundamental statements that people need to know when they get or ask for a statement. So I think once we decide the clarity of that, this is one of those key points for people to know.
And that's one of the things, I mentioned that we've got some litigation, for lack of a better word, around this right now. And that's one of the things that we're talking about is our statements say you have to be 55 to get the employer component, but it doesn't say, and it's reduced. If you left, employment before, it's reduced to 89.29. So
And
there's
Kathy,
some
because
issue
this is
here.
because this is in legal, this is probably one that we need to stay away from for a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one that, we're working on, and I think we can work through that legal process then for them to give us some suggested corrections and clarifications to wording.
Catherine, again, there's separate counsel for this matter. So for those of you wondering, I'm staying out of this one entirely.
I don't know. Again, this one starts to get into a lot of.
Yeah, again, this formula, I assume, is come and cut and paste from somewhere that is not. It wasn't coming from, I'm guessing, the committee 20 or 30 or 40 years ago.
Yeah. I think this whole section here, section 4.7, let's defer until the legal component is taken care of, and I can ask for some assistance from them on how they would view cleaning that up to make that more clear for everybody. All right, it is 4:53. We're starting a new section. Do we want to continue on this section, or do we want to visit this section next meeting? Okay. Hey, we're on page 20, guys. We're making progress. It's slow. It's very slow, but it's good work. I did get, Blake had sent a question about next month's agenda, and one of the things to talk about on next month's agenda is process for the 401A, how we're going to roll that out, how we're going to enroll people, all of that. And to be honest, haven't gotten that figured out completely. So I will have information by our May meeting of how we're going to roll that information out to people and how we're going to get people enrolled in that. What's the employee's responsibility? What's our responsibility? If we roll stuff out and they don't enroll, are we going to do an automatic enrollment? I mean, all that kind of stuff that needs to be addressed. So we'll have that on the next agenda. And then Blake had also mentioned it, revisiting the investment policy. And I think that's a continued conversation that we keep having. I'd like to again engage Alan in that conversation. So perhaps the next meeting would be a good one to have him do a little bit of work on that, or if not the May meeting, for sure the June meeting for that investment conversation.
And I think I will throw back out, as I had shared with others, is to be clear about, there was some asks from folks about, looking at any investment change from the actuarial side of things. And I know I've seen, and thank you, Barb, and I'd seen it before, the BTC analysis, but I just don't know if there was something more from an actuarial perspective that others were asking. Just because I can't see or couldn't find where that type of analysis was done back in either of the previous two adjustments. So that's really more a question for the group of if there's something specific to send to Kathy so that everybody can get whatever information we think is going to help us to really have that discussion in the best, most robust way and make the most informed decision that we can.
So yeah, if there's things that you need to make decisions or to be better informed, to be prepared to make some decisions, please let me know what those are. And like I said, I will come prepared next time to discuss enrollment in 401A, and then let's keep tackling this plan document in as much as we can. Anything else? All right, thank you everybody for your time, and again, we'll see you in May. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.